The next question we've got here is from Michael. So Michael's question is, I saw a post from another commentator on Australian Property discussing Labor's first home buyer plan. They suggested that all properties below 950 will grow to that price level because that is the cutoff for the first home buyer scheme. Do you guys agree with this assessment? Same for other markets at the cutoff price for first home buyers. So I guess firstly to Michael's question, this isn't our opinion. This is RBA have done a study on this and basically reaffirmed this. Was back a few years ago, but this has always been a long held view in property terms, is that government grants and initiatives essentially push house pricing along. And the reason it does that, or I guess the implications of how it does that, if you just think of it as a barrier to entry, if we've got a property and let's just say it's worth $1 million, and for me to be able to afford that property, and I know this is not the case, but for me to be able to afford that property, I need $250,000 of savings, whether it's my personal savings or given to me. Now, there will only be a certain amount of individuals that will have that amount of money available to them to go out and buy that property. So the demand versus the supply is probably more heavier weighted to the supply side, so that doesn't accelerate. Now, if all of a sudden you remove barriers to entry, now the barriers to entry that they're talking about is the 5% deposit scheme, and that being opened up to more people now. So it's not that they're loosening the caveats, same as the help to buy scheme, the shared equity scheme with the government as well. They're talking about opening that up as well. So they're removing caveats and making it accessible to more people, just any first home buyer. I think originally, and don't quote me on this, but I think originally it was for couples or individuals. I think now people can do it in terms of families or friends together. Like so, there's been a bit of a relaxing of the rule, but it's going to open up the door for more people to do it. And then what that's going to mean is if more people are trying to buy property, well, again, then we've weighted more people on the demand side than there is supply, because we already know that there is a chronic supply issue across the country. This isn't new news. You know, builders falling over, not enough homes being built. We're missing our target, and that's another question to get into, but not for today. But we're going to have more demand than there's supply. So yes, I do think it's going to continue to push up. Now, whether it gets to 950, there's a few things, and I'll get onto that in a moment. But some other things to just keep in mind in terms of they've also changed the price caps. So, and this, I believe, is going to change again from July next year. I think it might be going up to around the $1.5 million mark for New South Wales, and Victoria. It's going to change as well. It'd be very interesting, though, because if that is the case and you're going to go in there with a 5% deposit, now, not again, it's hard to keep up with these schemes because they're changing all the time, but let's just use New South Wales as an example here. Well, if you're buying a $1.3 million property, you've still got to pay your stamp duty. So let's just factor in that's around 5% of the value of the property or the buying costs. So you're going to still have to come up with the money for that. But let's just call it that we're going to go out there and we're going to buy a $1.3 million property with a $1.3 million loan. So that essentially means your repayments per month are going to be around about I think it's $7,800 or $8,000 is what I calculated it earlier today, which basically means if you've got $8,000 a year going into your repayments each and every month, that is going to have a huge, huge, huge impact on your cost of living. So when I calculated it, that's if your combined income was around that kind of $260,000 a year number, that's 60% of your household wage still going into servicing your mortgage. So what that's going to mean is it's really not done anything from an affordability standpoint. It's not made it any easier, or let's just say it might have been easier to buy the property to get into the market because you needed less at a deposit and there was less hurdles. But from a cost of living standpoint, if still 60% of your salary between a couple is going into funding this purchase, it just means the average loan size is going to go up higher and higher. And it just means it's going to be more of a cost of living squeeze across the board. And that's kind of why I guess I referenced in terms of, there's a video we put out 7 months ago, there we go, why the $500,000 property is kind of just disappearing on us really, really quickly. And a few things we touched on there is in terms of, interest rate cuts are going to boost borrowing power. there's very, very few investment grade properties that remain under 500,000. I'll get into some statistics for everybody as well after this as well. But the other thing as well, there's only about 40 suburbs nationally which actually fit into that. And then in terms of investors holding out and not selling, so investors are not moving on now. So they've kind of weathered the storm on the interest rate cycle, and they're just going to keep pushing those assets along. And that's also reflective of some stats I'll run through with everybody in a moment. But consumer confidence is continuing to rebound as interest rate cuts, or even not even the cuts, but the holding. And first home buyer demand is continuing to be fueled in that kind of sub 600 plus market really now. I think in Melbourne, anything below $2 million right now in Melbourne is absolutely surging along. And then from the investor standpoint, speaking to some agents recently in some regional markets, if a property hits the market and it's below that $600,000 price point, they are getting absolutely inundated with interest, normally getting kind of a dozen plus offers on a property. So now, I guess going back to the original question from Michael in terms of, will it get properties to 950? I mean, potentially one day, but I think we're a little bit away from getting that being the minimum baseline. It's going to take some time to actually get to those numbers. But it'll be, so I've got some interesting statistics, and I'll throw back to this question a little bit later on, because there's some interesting stats when we get into the pricing of property, which I want to cover off as well. But thanks for covering off that question, Michael.